Welcome to episode 9 of the Overwatch League off-season recap. Can you believe we've already been doing these weekly segments for over a month? Time really does fly. But anyway, we had a handful of interesting moves that happened across the league, and many of which involve familiar faces, so let's get down to business. Starting with the Seoul Dynasty, it was announced that both SBB and Anamo were joining the team for 2021. They moved on from their veteran Toby real quick by picking up 2 other Season 1 veterans in his place. I swear that Seoul are like some refugee site for Season 1 guys who played on other all-Korean rosters. Too bad Toby's gone because a Season 1 Seoul player is all they're missing really. Anyway, in terms of the acquisitions Seoul made, they're not that bad. Are they insane game-changing pickups? Probably not, but that doesn't mean they can't be impactful. Both individuals can bring certain contributions to the table, and I'm going to start with the more controversial pickup that a lot of people have seemed to question. So why did Seoul bring in SBB? They certainly did not need a tracer thanks to Profit, and Fitz is arguably better on the sniper heroes and McCree. So I think you kind of have to look beyond the fine lines. SBB is clearly there for mental and leadership purposes. I've heard people criticize this answer by saying they already have veterans on the roster, so why does it matter? Well, in my viewpoint, Gesture and Profit aren't really that type of leader. They are experienced, yes, but they aren't that true vocal leader like SBB is. Let's be honest, the 2020 Seoul Dynasty had some internal problems. It's like painfully obvious. They were absurdly inconsistent, and most definitely that did lead to some people getting tilted on their roster. This team lacked a true direction. They did not have an identity for most of this year, and whenever they faced adversity, it would spiral out of control to the point where they would go on losing streaks. Sure, the coaching and the poor execution shares the blame, but losing streaks from teams who aren't terrible usually have a lot more to it. Despite Gesture being so important to this team, I'm not too sure if he served that type of leadership role that the team needs. Then there's Profit, who is more of a lead by example type of guy. He inspires his teammates through his play rather than his words. SBB has that type of power though. SBB is a vocal leader. Even if he's not in the game, he can still make a difference with his words. He is one of the best teammates of all time, and we've seen him for 3 years on New York just be fantastic with boosting team morale. SBB is one of the best available when it comes to having that anti-tilt personality on your roster. He might help in-game a little bit as well. I know his skill set isn't game-changing on the DPS lineup they already have, but he is undeniably clutch. I think that people need to give SBB a chance before calling this a bad pickup. I'm not saying he's guaranteed to help transform this team into a top-tier contender, but he definitely has what it takes to improve their odds. Turning over to Anamo, I quite like this addition. He has a drastically different style than Toby, and that's going to make Seoul play way less aggressively in-game. But the thing is, aggressive no longer seems like the playstyle suited for Seoul anyway. During the season, I really thought that was what they needed to advance their skills, but now I'm starting to think that a slower-paced team-oriented style is going to do them even better. And that's what Anamo kind of specializes in, you know? He likes to take it slow and steady with intelligent decision-making. That might be exactly what Seoul needs. That's what a lot of the Seoul players on the roster already like to do. Profit may have a crazy ceiling when it comes to carry potential, but I tend to think he thrives more playing around his team, and the same applies for somebody like Creative, among others. Anamo kind of helps round out this mindset. Oh, and another thing. I know a lot of people think that Anamo is not that good anymore, and I don't entirely agree with that. While I do think his passive style hurt his team at times in 2020, I also think that the way the NYXL played this year doesn't really suit him. Hoxel, Hotbutt, and Jonek required a lot of attention, and it made his life a living nightmare to have to care for that many people all at once. And Seoul could be a lot more chill, I think, for him. He can play more up to his strengths because his new teammates will share similar qualities. His Lucio may not be as good as Toby's, but they certainly do have a comparable BAP and Brig, and I would say Anamo has the better Mercy for sure. I don't know about SBB, but Anamo seriously might have a chance of success on Seoul. I just hope the Dynasty address some other issues with that tank line of theirs now. Get a real off-tank to handle the Diva and Zarya duties. They seem to be intent on Gesture being the starting main tank for whatever reason, so please don't put Marvel through the same experience again. It's okay to play him on the Sigma, but they should not limit their options. A well-balanced, versatile team will be the key to having a more consistent season as well as another deep playoff run. Next up, we have the San Francisco Shock picking up Nero out of free agency. While it makes sense from a personnel viewpoint, I was a little surprised to see the Shock make a bid for him. I honestly thought they'd go with somebody like Libero instead. Too bad for Houston fans. Originally, it was thought that Nero would be signing over there, but then I heard that the Shock kind of swooped in with a last-second offer to steal him away. I mean, no offense to the Outlaws, but picking the Shock over them is kind of a no-brainer. That's an elite franchise you're joining, and Nero not only has a much better chance of winning a championship, but his odds of butting into a star are also a lot better. And it's worth mentioning as well that Nero is from California, so this gave him a chance to be much, much closer to home. And after playing so far away from home last year, this probably feels like a major relief. That's unneeded stress that he no longer has to worry about. It's an all-around dream signing for Nero. It's not too bad for the Shock either, and it definitely beats having Tayo not as your only flex when he's more of a hits game player anyway. Now of course, it is a downgrade compared to Rascal, but it could be a lot worse. Nero might be able to awaken some latent potential late into his career under Krusty. Honestly, I like Nero as a player, and I've heard a lot of people criticize the move saying Nero was not good on the charge last year, and I kind of disagree. I really don't like this narrative that he's some Pharah one trick. I will definitely admit that he did not play as well as Eileen, and he definitely did not look as sharp after Eileen took over, but Nero genuinely was not playing that bad before that moment in time. He made some good contributions as a starter early in the season, and people are kind of acting like he's a bad pickup because he needs to flex onto everything in the world, which simply is not true. In all likelihood, he's there for projectile purposes. If you want to call him a projectile specialist, then be my guest. He's not going to play Tracer or Widow or anything like that, but that's okay. He has his role like many of the DPS players on the team right now, and many that came before him who played for the Shock. He's there to do a lot of the things that Rascal did this year. When double hit scan metas are prevalent, he's not going to be in, and I really don't hate this move at all because of it. It fills the projectile void in the roster, and it gives Krusty yet another player who has the potential to become a star. Nero did not have the best coaching on Guangzhou, remember that. This is a big step up, and I'm expecting that to be reflected upon in his gameplay during 2021. But it does not end there for the San Francisco Shock in this video, because in typical Shock fashion, they continued to load up their DPS situation even more with the addition of Glister. I'll be totally honest, I had no idea he was going to the Shock, like not a single clue. This came out of nowhere. I'm sure there were some other teams who definitely needed Glister more too, so you would have to assume the same mindset as Nero applies to Glister. If the Shock do have an interest in you as a player, it's really hard to say no. Compared to the resources Glister had in Season 3, this is going to feel like the best thing ever probably. The coaching, the teammates, the atmosphere, it's all going to be 1,000 times better. I've seen a bunch of people online say they don't understand how Glister's going to fit into this roster given the influx of talent they already have. And to that I say, don't question it, because it's the Shock. Just accept it. 9 times out of 10, they're going to make the right decision. Their org is way too good from top to bottom. I guarantee you they find a use for Glister somewhere. Look at what happened with Ants. At the time, the Shock still had their core 4 DPS who helped them win the championship, and nobody knew what Ants was going to do and what role he would have. But look what happened. A guy who recently came out of retirement won a Role Star Award in Season 3. Krusty is a mastermind. He is one of the best in the business at squeezing every last bit of potential out of his players. I know it may not make a lot of sense considering they have Ants on the roster, but they'll make it work. I know they will. I could honestly see Glister even being more of a flex player anyway if he needs to. What many people don't know about Glister is that he can also play a bit of projectile. He could play characters like Doomfist and Genji at a reasonably high level back in the day. Much like Nero, I could see him coming in and filling specific needs. Plus, him and Ants would be deadly in a double sniper meta, let's be honest. Glister's going to do well on the Shock, I just know he will, and if I'm wrong, come back to this video and laugh at me. On a side note, it is crazy how the Shock have continued to build upon this roster. They're back up to 5 DPS again, plus they got somebody close to the level of Moth as a replacement at the main support position. The rich are continuing to stay rich. Not necessarily money-wise, but definitely from the personnel standpoint. The Shock definitely appeared to be one of the current frontrunners to win Season 4. Now it's time for some Vancouver Titans news. It's been a long time since we've talked about them. So on Tuesday, they announced the signing of Linkzr, FRD/Fried, whatever you want to call him, and Fire all at once. Not gonna lie, these feel like the most Vancouver signings you can think of. They said they wanted some veterans along with their tier 2 players, and what better veterans to get than ones that most teams probably aren't even that interested in to begin with. It fits their budget/developmental roster perfectly. Linkzr in particular is a very surprising pickup, but also one that I welcome with open arms. He might not be all that great of a player these days, but I love that guy. Linkzr is so chill and he works very hard. He holds himself to very high standards, so it's wonderful to see his work pay off with another chance in the league. Replacing Shockwave with him is not a great look though. In fact, it's only going to make fans doubt this team even more. Linkzr is one of the most inconsistent hit skins we have. When he's hitting his shots, he can keep pace with guys like KSP and Glister, but we can only get those performances out of him like 1 out of every 5 games, and that's a problem, of course. Could a change of scenery serve as a motivator and a way for him to improve and become more consistent? Yeah, sure, but I'm not going to hold my breath. He's been playing this game for a long time, so in all likelihood he is already past his prime. But even so, I'm still glad to see Linkzr stick around at least for 1 more year. I really thought he was going to retire for sure. With Fire and FRD, I have a pretty similar mindset for both of them. They still have a lot of untapped potential just waiting to be unleashed. We saw a bit out of what Fried could do back in Season 2, and Fire used to get praise when he played in Tier 2, I believe. But the two of them pretty much never played in 2020, but I am a firm believer that they could still be reliable players. FRD did have a decent D.Va and Hog back in the day. And I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong down in the comment section of course, Fire played a good Lucio and a decent Mercy on Team Envy, not to mention that his brig wasn't horrible this year on Atlanta the few times we saw it. Give these guys some playtime and they might show you some results. Now there's going to be a lot of people who are critical of Vancouver getting a bunch of bench boys, but please give them a chance. As somebody who used to think this way all the time, I think it's very important to keep an open mind with players in this type of situation because you never know what could happen. Another thing to keep in mind is that Vancouver aren't really trying to ball out. They aren't pursuing a title by any means, and being one of the best is not the current goal, so it doesn't matter all that much if they don't draw in the big stars. It's about developing their current talent. Look at the Shock. That's what they did in Season 1. They developed their guys, and just a year later, they were champions. You never know what could happen in this league, so stay patient, Vancouver fans. Moving onward, the Shanghai Dragons pulled off a bit of a debate. Remember how they parted ways with Diem? Well, now he's back. First Toronto does it with Beast, and now Shanghai with Diem. These teams love to keep us on our toes, and to be honest, I'm all for it. Also important to keep in mind is that many teams already appear to be pretty set at hitscan. There weren't a lot of places for Diem to go, but Shanghai still needed a true sniper specialist, so after exploring his options, it probably became clear to Diem that Shanghai was his best bet. Given that Shanghai loved Diem and they realized that he is a fan favorite, I'm sure they were more than willing to renegotiate with him. I guess because he technically left, we technically should be calling this a good pickup? It feels weird to say that, but it's true, I guess. Despite not playing all that much this year, Diem is still considered to be an elite hit scan. He is easily top tier on Widow, and there's no doubt about it. My one hope is that Shanghai get more consistent use out of him this year. Even if the final results don't show it, he really did have a lot of good individual performances whenever he did get playtime in 2020. So knowing that, it would be cool if Coach Moon implements him into the game plan a bit more often. There's a lot of dangerous snipers out there, so why not field one of your own when the situation is right? Overall though, I'm really happy the Dragons brought him back. For one, Diem is way too talented not to be in this league. But two, the Dragons DPS rotation is totally stacked. You have absolute flexibility with Fleta and Erster, elite sniping in Diem, and a crazy good Sombra player in Lip who keeps getting better with every passing day. I know I was talking about the Shock, but the Dragons are mad stacked as well. If Fake can prove to be anywhere close to what Fearless was, then this team is going to be very, very good, and they could be that one team that pushes the Shock to their limits. Season 4 is shaping up to be very interesting, and I can't wait. One other quick thing about Shanghai is they did part ways with their former assistant coach and former main support player of the London Spitfire, Quartermain. Will this make a difference in the Shanghai coaching? I have no idea. I'm pretty sure that Coach Moon is largely responsible, and he has some other good assistants under him as well, and they could always replace Quartermain with somebody even better theoretically, so I'm not too worried about it. The next segment belongs to the Boston Uprising, who acquired former Shanghai Dragons main tank Stand 1. Not gonna lie, I kinda like it for both parties. Stand 1 has a chance to be a starting main tank in the Overwatch League again, and Boston get a bit of an upgrade at their main tank position. I understand that Fusions is great from the comms and leadership viewpoint, but his skills really aren't that impressive compared to the league average. Stand 1 may not be perfect either, but he's more explosive and versatile for sure. You could reasonably argue he is stronger on every single main tank hero. Ryan's the only one I can think of that would even be close, but even then I still think that Stand 1 edges him out on that character as well. Stand 1 has more potential as a playmaker, and we all know that Boston can use all the help they can get in that department. If the synergy is not lacking, Stand 1 and Punk sounds better than Fusions and Punk. I wonder though if Boston do plan to sign a Korean off-tank to complement Stand 1 for synergy purposes though. Knowing Boston, they probably won't, but it might be a good idea. Either way, Boston appeared to have made yet another upgrade. Stand 1's not blow your socks off amazing, but he showed plenty of flashes on Shanghai last year. Putting him on a team with Lori as the coach plus Myungbong and a rejuvenated I'm 37 could be pretty decent. I'm glad to see Stand 1 getting another chance though. Now he has a chance to properly show us what he's made of as a starting player in the league. Next, we have the Houston Outlaws, who unveiled their new tank line out of Talent Esports. Please give a warm welcome to the main tank player JJanggu, sorry if I botched that pronunciation, and the off-tank player Piggy. A new era has begun for the Houston Outlaws on tank. It's their first ever full Korean tank line, and their first tank line from the same team since Muma and Coolmat. I'll be completely honest, I have not paid a lot of attention to Talent Esports this year, so it's difficult for me to judge how well these two could perform. From what I've been told, neither of them were sought after players by any means. Neither player really showed high promise. Now granted, they were both part of a competitive team that finished top 4 in Korean contenders, but neither of them were really seen as these noteworthy hard carry players. I've had people who have watched and analyzed them far more closely call them the weakest link on Talent Esports. So in other words, they're both just alright. And just alright is not going to help Houston overcome their long and sad history. I'm hoping I'm incorrect about this though. Maybe Junkbuck and Harsha can mold them into better players. I have my doubts, but I am willing to give them a proper chance to prove themselves. In terms of what they play, I've been told Piggy is similar to Hoppa, as in he plays a little bit of everything, but isn't really insane on any particular hero. And JJanggu played Orisa and Ball, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm curious to see if either of them can pan out, and if the Outlaws can get value at least out of one of them, I would consider this a pretty big W. If this is the only tank line for the Outlaws, then this is going to be seen as very risky. It will surely be interesting to see how they do, but still a major gamble nonetheless. Next up is the Gladiators, coming out with the biggest Who Mega LoL signing of the offseason so far. Despite having Shu, they acquired the flex support player known as Skewed. He's a relatively unknown prospect, and only the most hardcore fans are going to recognize him by name. The best his team has ever done is a group stage appearance in contenders. The rest of his history is spent in minor competitions. It's a bizarre signing to say the least, and if double flex support is not meta, it's hard to imagine him doing anything at all. But that's only looking at it from face value. Even though it feels confusing, I'm not going to doubt this acquisition for even a second. I've fallen into this trap before. Some of the most dangerous prospects come from these terrible teams, so I'm going to assume that anything's possible here. He might just be a long-term project that has developed over time, or he could ball out almost immediately and be a difference maker. It wouldn't be the first time where we see somebody go off. Look at Sanguinar and Fitz. Both of them were relatively unknown prospects coming into the league who had little to no experience in major events, much like Skewed. But now look at them. Both of them have quickly developed into special players, and look at Fitz in particular. He literally just came off a pop-off performance in the Grand Finals in his second year in the league, so Diem might be scheming something big here. Moving onward, we have the Valiant officially announcing that KSF will not be rejoining the team for 2021. While I'm sure the Valiant have a replacement in mind who could fill the hole at DPS for them, well at least flex DPS, this is still a relatively sad piece of news. KSF has grown so much with this team along with his role as a playmaker, and it truly is remarkable. Coach Moon was right about him all along back when he made the Valiant pick him up in 2018. KSF has some real talent, and we saw him develop said talent firsthand throughout his years on this team. As a Valiant fan myself, it's sad to see him go. With him gone, the 2018 Valiant roster is officially dead. Nobody is left. As someone who felt super connected with that team, this is a very tough moment on me emotionally. The future's bright for sure, but those memories were some of my fondest as a fan of the league. KSF really did grow on me throughout the years too. Both his personality and in-game performances were something I admired more and more as time went by. When he first joined the team and Coach Moon started experimenting with him in the lineup, I used to get so upset. I would always say, why the heck is this guy coming in the game? I don't get it. Because whenever they put him in for a map in 2018, the Valiant would always lose. It was very frustrating and I never wanted to see him on stage. And that kind of continued until around the stage 2 mark of 2019. That is when he started to win me over. Not only did I recognize the progress he was making along with how chill of a person he was, but I also saw just how dedicated he was to improving and becoming the very best player he could be. And the results show. He's not some god tier player, but he's more than held his own against some noteworthy opponents in the past, and I really do admire his work ethic a lot, and I always appreciate the contributions he has made for my team. Hopefully this is not the last we've seen of him though. He deserves to keep playing in this league. He's proven himself, like more than proven himself at this point. Good luck, Kyle. I'm going to be rooting for you, dude. Lastly, we have some coaching news on the block. Head coach Arachne has chosen the assistant coaches he wants as part of his staff, and what's cool is they're both familiar names. The Charge welcomed both Neko and Daemin to their coaching staff. It's so cool to see Neko back in the league. It's just unfortunate that he doesn't get to come back as a player. I would have loved to see Neko get a redemption arc after taking some time to grind in Tier 2. Last I heard of him, he was playing main support for O2 Blast. And now he finds himself in a coaching role instead, which is pretty sad. But regardless, it's great to have him back. And the same applies for Daemin, who was on the infamous 0-40 Shanghai Dragons. So in terms of how they do, Neko, I have no idea. This is technically his first official coaching gig, and given his rich history as a support player, I guess you could say that he could end up being a decent support coach one day. On the other hand, Daemin recently coached on Element Mystic for the last 4 months, which is something I never even realized until doing some research for this video. During his time as coach, Element Mystic had a competitive showing in the most recent season of Korean Contenders. Sure, they didn't come in first place like we saw in 2019, but they still did get top 4 and they went undefeated in the group stage portion. Daemin had to have been doing something right if the team made it that far and the Charge were so interested in picking him up. I'm excited to see what he brings to the table. A bit of a redemption arc might be on our hands for both of these players, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see what they can do. And with that said, that's going to wrap up episode 9 of the Overwatch League off-season recap. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you're new and you want to stay up to date with all things Overwatch League news related. And don't forget to let me know what you think of all of these new moves down in the comment section. Don't forget you can also keep up with the series through the link in the description to the playlist, and you can also further support me by joining my Discord server, following me on Twitter, and becoming a channel member. And as always, thanks so much for watching this video. I appreciate your support so much, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.